One of the most important teachings of the Rosicrucians, according to William Walker Atkinson, who wrote The Secret Doctrine of the Rosicrucians, is metempsychosis, or reincarnation. It is also called the Transmigration of Souls. The essence of the doctrine is that the individual soul survives upon death of the physical body and is re-embodied in a new physical body by rebirth after resting for a time. The Rosicrucians teach that the evolution of man has been accomplished not just via physical means, but by the advance and ascent caused by the improvement in the reincarnating individual soul, which climbs ever higher as it tends upward and onward. Atkinson quotes a writer who says, "The teachings hold that evolution is caused by the soul striving, struggling, and pressing toward fuller and still fuller expression, using matter as material, and yet always struggling to free itself from the confining and retarding influence of the latter. The struggle results in an unfoldment, causing sheath after sheath of the confining material bonds to be thrown off and discarded as the spirit molds matter to serve its higher purposes. Evolution is but the process of birth of the imprisoned spirit, unfolding and extricating itself from the web of matter in which it has been involved and enfolded. And the pains and struggles are but incidents of the spiritual parturition." Rosicrucians teach that the human soul is on a path of progress, learning through lessons of life and experience, life after life, and storing away the essence of these impressions. These go on to form the basis of the character of the individual when he or she is reborn. The rebirth and conditions of that rebirth are not forced upon the individual soul. Instead, the individual soul is attracted toward rebirth by reason of the presence of certain desires in its character. It is reborn into certain environments solely because it has within itself certain unsatisfied desires which could be satisfied only in just those environments. Each soul contains within itself the attracting force of certain sets of desires, and this force attracts to the soul certain conditions and experiences. There is no element of punishment or of injustice in the operation of this law, for it gives to each soul just what that soul requires to meet its unsatisfied desires. The experiences and conditions serve to burn out of the soul certain desires which are holding it back in its progress. The destruction of these makes possible future advancement. The Rosicrucians teach that the individuals of any subrace who have outstripped their fellows in spiritual unfoldment are still bound by race ties to the brothers left behind, up to a certain point. In any case, such individuals are compelled until the great body of the subrace moves up to the position of the individual. But these individuals are not forced to undergo a needless repetition of births and rebirths during this waiting period. Instead, they spend the period on some exalted plane on which they come in contact with advanced souls and higher beings who act as their teachers. In some cases, these advanced individuals consent to return to earth life as great teachers in order to aid in the general progress of the subrace. Atkinson quotes one Rosicrucian writer who says, "Many object to the doctrine of rebirth on the ground that the experiences of each life, not being remembered, must be useless and without value. This is an erroneous view of the subject. For while such experiences may not be fully remembered, that they are not lost to us at all, but really form a part of the material of which our minds are composed. They exist in the form of feelings, characteristics, inclinations, likes and dislikes, affinities, attractions, and repulsions. In this form, they are as much in evidence in our lives as are the experiences of yesterday which are well remembered. What you are today is by reason of the very experiences which you now fail to remember. They exist in your character and have helped to mold and shape it. The law of attraction has caused you to attract that toward you for which you have an affinity, and which also causes others to be attracted to you. In the same way, and from the same cause, are the many reunions in this life of persons who have been related to each other in previous lives. The old loves, the old hates, work out in the new lives. We are bound to those whom we have loved, and also to those whom we have injured. The story must be worked out to the last chapter, although an increasing knowledge of the why and wherefore of such things may relieve one of many entangling attachments and relationships of this kind. Rosicrucian teachings include detailed instructions concerning the life of the soul between incarnations and the phenomena of the astral world. When the moment of death of the physical body arrives for a person, the soul casts off the ordinary physical body and leaves the scene, clothed in the garments of the elemental soul. At first, the separation is not complete, for the elemental soul remains attached to the physical body by a thin, slender thread or cord. This finally breaks and allows the soul to proceed on its way. In the garments of the elemental soul, the person is invisible to the ordinary sight of men. Only clairvoyance can detect its presence. The disembodied soul then passes on to the astral plane. This is not a place, but rather a state or condition of being. There are no space limitations on this plane. The astral plane manifests its phenomena by means of a higher rate of vibration than those concerned in the phenomena of the earth plane. Different planes of being may occupy the same space at the same time without interfering with one another. Once the disembodied soul reaches the astral plane, it falls into a deep sleep or state of coma. This state is necessary in order to prepare the soul for its life on the new plane. The soul which has left the earth scene with calmness and a peaceful mental attitude drops into a dreamless slumber. However, those minds that have been filled with strong desires connected with earth life often experience what are called astral dreams, in which they revisit the scenes of earth life, and if possible, may indulge in more or less distorted and dreamy communications through mediums and others. The strong desires and grief on the part of those left behind on earth sometimes sets up a rapport condition. This may disturb the sleeping soul and interfere with its needed preparatory rest. In the slumber state, the disembodied soul is fully protected from the influence or presence of other beings. Some souls require a long period of sleep on the astral plane before awakening into new activities, while others require only a short time. The general rule is that the higher the spiritual development of the soul, the longer is its period of soul sleep, while less developed souls rush speedily to rebirth. In the soul sleep, a strange process occurs, and that is the preparation for the sloughing off of the lower sheaths of the soul. This leaves it free to enter life on the astral plane, clad only in the garments of its highest stage of spiritual attainment that have been reached by it. Each soul awakens on the astral plane prepared to dwell on the plane of its highest and best, leaving the rest behind it. It awakens on the plane in which the highest and best in itself is given a chance to develop and expand and to make progress. On the astral plane, there are countless subplanes and divisions thereof, all of which are more or less independent of each other. The distinction between the planes are the result of differences in the rate of vibrations and do not represent differences in space or distances in space. Each subplane or division is inhabited by souls exactly fitted to dwell upon it by reason of their respective degree of spiritual enfoldment. It is the law of attraction which produces this result. Each soul is restricted to the realms of its own subplane or division of the astral plane. It may visit the planes beneath it, but cannot visit those higher than its own. The law of vibrations acts as the astral police in these matters. Disembodied souls may communicate with and have association with each other, but only by the higher soul visiting the lower, and never the reverse. The environment of the various subplanes of the astral plane correspond with the ideas and beliefs of the souls occupying them. The thoughts and ideals of the soul are reflected upon the receptive substance of the astral plane. Each soul is the creator of its own environment and world. By its thought forms, it builds itself a congenial world. The soul makes progress on the astral plane and prepares itself for a better and happier environment upon rebirth. During that sojourn, it assimilates and digests the experiences of its last earth life and learns the true lessons of these experiences. These are reflected in the new character which it is forming. Past mistakes are seen, and the true meaning of many puzzling experiences are perceived. The soul takes stock of itself and is better prepared to meet the conditions of the next earth life. On the astral plane, the soul receives the aid and assistance of some of the great spiritual teachers of the race. These teachers minister to the wants of the pained and suffering souls who are trying to find the way out of their troubles and mistakes. Finally, after the longer or short period of sojourn of the soul upon the astral plane, the duration of which depends upon the degree of spiritual development of the soul, there comes to it the first dawn of a new condition known as the second soul sleep, in which the soul is prepared for its new birth on earth. Atkinson quotes a writer who says, "The soul may have passed by a few years, or perhaps 100 or 1,000 years of earth time on the astral plane, according to its degree of development and unfoldment. But sooner or later, the soul feels a desire to gain new experience and to manifest in a new life some of the advancement which has come to it by reason of its unfoldment on the astral plane. It selects the proper parents and most advantageous environment. Before the rebirth takes place, it undergoes a period of digestion and assimilation of its experiences on the astral plane. It again falls into a state of soul slumber, dies on the astral plane, and passes forward to rebirth on earth. The soul is not forced to reincarnate against its desires. In fact, it reincarnates because of its unsatisfied desires. These desires have created bonds of attraction between it and the things of earth. These desires can only be satisfied through another experience of earth life amidst environment and conditions best suited to allow it to manifest these desires. Desire is the great motive power of the soul in determining the conditions of rebirth and the very face of rebirth itself. It is not meant that these desires are necessarily low or unworthy desires or longings. They may even be of the highest character. Desires high and low are the seeds of action. Atkinson quotes another writer on the subject of reincarnation who says, "The soul, preserving its desire for material things, of the flesh and the material life, and not being able to divorce itself from these things, will naturally fall into the current of rebirth which will lead it toward conditions in which these desires will flourish and become manifest. It is only when the soul, by means of many earth lives, begins to see the worthlessness and illusory nature of earthly desires, and it begins to become attracted by the things of the life of its higher nature, and escaping the flowing currents of earthly rebirth, that it rises above them and is carried to the higher spheres." The average person, after years of earthly experience, is apt to say that he or she has no more desire for earth life, and that his or her only desire is to leave the same behind forever. These persons are perfectly sincere in their statement and beliefs, but a glance into their inmost souls would reveal an entirely different state of affairs. They are not, as a rule, really tired of earth life, but are merely tired of the particular kind of earth life which they have experienced during that incarnation. They have discovered the illusory nature of a certain set of earthly experiences and feel disgusted at the same, but they are still full of another set of experiences on earth. They have failed to find happiness or satisfaction in their own experience, but they will admit, if they are honest with themselves, that if they could have had things just so and so instead of thus and so, they would have found happiness and satisfaction. It is the longing for the if that is the motive for rebirth. In concluding the topic of reincarnation, Atkinson says no soul which does not in its inmost soul desire to be reborn on earth will ever be so reborn. Such a soul is attracted toward other spheres where the attractions of earth do not exist. In that case, the law of attraction carries the soul away from earth, not toward it. There are many souls currently on the astral plane who are undergoing the final stages of the casting off of the earthly bonds, and there are many souls now in earth life which will never again return to earth, but which after their next sojourn on the astral plane will rise to the higher planes of existence, leaving the earth and all earthly things behind forever. At the present time, we are nearly at the end of a cycle in which a very great number of souls are preparing for their upward flight. Another very important Rosicrucian teaching is that the evolution of man is not confined to this planet, the Earth, but rather is extended to a chain of 7 planets. The Rosicrucians teach that the evolutionary processes of this planet are linked with and blended with the life on the 6 other planets of our planetary chain. These seen planets are 7 planets are closely linked by subtle etheric forces, and there is a constant electric current passing from one to the others and flowing through the entire circuit. These connected planets constitute the chain of worlds, which is the series of homes of the individual soul and the circuit of which is traveled by all individual souls. Not only does each individual soul now on Earth reincarnate a number of times on this planet, but in the course of the ages, it progresses to the next highest planet, just as in ages past it has progressed from the next lowest one. This round of chain of planets has been made several times by the human race in some form of existence and will be made again several times. There are 7 great rounds of human progress around the chain of worlds, and in each round there are 7 races in which the individual soul must manifest. The present round of the human race, says Atkinson, is the 4th. Each of the 7 races of the present or 4th round of the race occupies the earth for a great period of time. The majority of the human race now on earth belong to the 5th race, although there are some stragglers from the 4th race still dwelling on earth. Each of these 7 great races of humanity are subdivided into 7 sub-races, and each sub-race is divided into 7 branches. Atkinson says that the period during which each great root race of the human race flourishes on earth is sharply marked off from that of the one succeeding it by great convulsions of nature, which destroy practically all traces of the preceding civilization, and which leave few survivors. Rosicrucian teachings have little to say about the history of the peoples of the first race and second race, but from what is taught we can gather that these peoples were of a very low order of humanity: cave dwellers, Stone Age people, and the fire people. These peoples were terminated as usual with a cataclysm, and its survivors were scattered among far distant lands. The next period that dawned was the time of the third race. The seat of the greatest activity of this group was in the continent of Lemuria, which was situated on the part of the globe which now lies at the bottom of the Pacific Ocean and parts of the Indian Ocean. Atkinson tells us that a few of these people became developed souls who broke through the fetters of materiality and reached the beginnings of the mental and spiritual planes of life. Some made great progress and were saved from the cataclysm in order to become the teachers of the mass of mankind during the next great cycle. They were the teachers of the new races and were looked upon as gods and supernatural beings. Legends and traditions arose concerning them, especially in the form of myths. Tradition says these people were chosen ones who migrated from Lemuria to certain islands of the sea, which are now part of the mainland of India. They formed the nucleus of the occult teachers of Lemuria, and they kept alight the flame of truth, with which was lightened the torches of the 4th race, the race of the Atlanteans. As in the case of the chosen ones of Lemuria, so it was with the elect ones of Atlantis, who were taken away from the doomed land sometime prior to its destruction. These advanced individuals of the race left their Atlantean homes and, led by the Spirit, migrated to portions of what are now known as South America and Central America. They left traces of their civilization in these lands. When the 5th race appeared, these advanced souls became the teachers of the new race and were afterwards remembered as gods and the heroes of mythology. The 5th race evolved rapidly. The chosen or elect ones were not the only ones saved from the destruction that overtook the majority of the race in these cataclysms. A few survivors were preserved that were not of this group, and although driven away from their former homes and reduced to first principles of living, they became the parents of the new race. The new races springing from the fittest of the survivors quickly formed subraces, which were composed of the better adapted souls seeking reincarnation, but the less fit sank into barbarism. A remnant of these degraded human creatives, Atkinson says, persisted in incarnation for thousands of years. There were also descendants of the elect who were saved from the destruction of Atlantis. The new races were the descendants of the scattered survivors of the Atlantean peoples, that is, of the common run of those peoples. But the elect were superior individuals of their race and imparted to their descendants their knowledge and wisdom. The descendants of some of the higher individuals were afterwards known as the Assyrians and the Babylonians, Roman, Grecian, and Carthaginian peoples, among others. These great nations rose and fell, as will the great nations of the future, Atkinson tells us. When a nation begins to decline, he says, it is because its more advanced souls have passed on, leaving only the less progressive souls behind to carry on the work of the subrace. The advanced souls pass on to new scenes of activity. Atkinson concludes by telling us that at the halfway point of the fourth round here, the polar point of the whole 7-year period is past. From this point onwards, the spiritual ego begins its real struggle with body and mind to manifest its transcendental power. In the 5th round to come, the struggle continues, but the transcendental faculties are largely developed. The intellect of the 5th round, as well as its spirituality, is an advance on that of the 4th, which is the present one. In the 6th round, humanity attains a degree of perfection, both of body and soul, of intellect and spirituality, which ordinary mortals of the present epoch do not possess. The most supreme combinations of wisdom, goodness, and transcendental enlightenment, which the world has ever seen or thought of, will represent the ordinary type of manhood. As to what the 7th round will be like, the most communicative occult teachers are silent. Mankind in the 7th round will be something altogether too godlike for mankind in the 4th round to forecast its attributes.